Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Board Gaming Doctor. My name is Phil, and I'll be your Board Game Doctor today. In this quick review, I'm going to talk about Nippon, specifically Nippon Zaibatsu, which is the newest edition of this game. This game was originally produced and published about 10 years ago or so, and there is an implementation of this game on Board Game Arena, of which I was first introduced to. Now, Nippon was one of the first games on Board Game Arena that I remember, and therefore the implementation itself is a little dated in terms of what you can do, just specifically for Board Game Arena. For example, things like the undo button is not present in this game, right? And so it's a little bit more bare bones than some of the more recent developments that we've seen on the platform, but it still functions very well, and it's an excellent way to experience this game if you don't have it on Tabletop Simulator or otherwise. But for the purposes of demonstrating, I do have the game here on Tabletop Simulator to talk about some of the differences, and then I'll go into a quick summary of what I think about this game. So I won't get into all of the rules, but essentially what you're trying to accomplish in this game is going through a few steps of essentially taking these workers from this offer. You place them onto your board after taking a corresponding action that is underneath the area that the worker is in. You place the worker here, and these actions vary in terms of progressing up tracks. Various tracks that are required to produce or build and produce goods from factories, which are listed here at the top of the board. And so as you produce these goods, you will be able to earn an income from them, as well as be able to turn them into influence on this board. And the biggest point of this game is kind of an area majority type of game, where if you have multiple influences and the most influence in these four regions of Nippon or Japan, then you will gain points intermittently throughout the game. And what this and there are plenty of ways to gain influence. You can build out trains to increase your influence, sell certain types of goods as well. You get certain bonuses along the way. And so one of my favorite mechanisms from this game, however, is what I mentioned before with these workers. So there is a reason why these workers are different colors. They all pertain to how much money you have to pay your workers by the end of the during the consolidation action, which is when you run out of money and or the ability to do actions when you place these workers on your board. The different types of workers, especially with this version of the game, will matter in terms of what your first worker's color is, as well as the last one, and how many different types of colors you have on your board. If you have multiple different types of colors, you will owe your workers more money during this consolidation phase. Think of it as a kind of feed your worker type of situation. So there are benefits to getting certain the same types of workers to reduce the cost. But in addition to that, you do, in this game, this is the first unique aspect of this game, is that based off of the bottom and top action or worker that you have during the consolidation phase, you get certain bonuses. Silk, the second kind of difference in this game, in the previous game you had blueprints, which helped you gain as a wild resource to be able to use, for different things. In this game, the silk is that same type of resource where it allows you to use it as money, or as well as to temporarily upgrade your R&D track here to be able to build out certain factories that require more R&D than you actually have. And so it's a good resource to have as a type of wild resource. The second and the final biggest change of this game is the Iwakura mission board. And so in the previous game, or the previous edition, you would be able to send out ships as well as trains onto this main board for influence. Now, the trains will solely be placed onto the central board, whereas the ships will go here. And what the two things that allow your ships to gain you some benefits are that you will gain the benefit that is shown next to the location that you send the ship to, and you gain an expert worker, which is automatically placed onto your board. Now, in terms of feeding your workers, that may or may not, play a part in how much money you might owe, but it does increase the amount of workers that you have placed without having to take an action and spend extra money for in order to gain some of these benefits. Now, these benefits I won't explain in detail, but they are uh, essentially used to increase the amount of points that you get at the end of the game for your how well you've progressed along these tracks, as well as what kinds of tokens and things that you've taken off of your board and put onto the main board, etc. You have contracts that you fulfill for money, or the ability to gain income, essentially. And so, what all this boils down to is a game where you have an interesting uh, worker placement, selection, and mechanism of how you take actions, all in which to increase your ability to progress on tracks, as well as increase your influence across the board of Japan here. And so it's a really it takes a lot of familiar and interesting mechanisms in terms of worker placement, area majority, contract fulfillment, track progressment, etc. But it has a few different tweaks and minor unique features that makes this game stand out. Now, with this new version, we do have additional ways to interact with some of the components from the past game, which I think is really neat. And I do believe that this extra bonuses that you get for, and resources that you get for how you place your workers here, not only adds another layer of decisions that you make when you select a worker to take an action with. You say you are planning to take a certain type of action, like build a train or build a factory, and the colored worker, might affect how much income you get after the consolidation phase when you return all the workers and handle that part of the game. And so, in addition to that, what kind of bonuses would allow your progression to happen at a more efficient rate, right? And so that adds a little bit of layered decision making to what kinds of workers you choose to get. And so I do appreciate that. It overall, I feel like it brings a new and a fresh way to approach this game. Everything about this game is pretty static except for where these goods are located. Every region also has a bonus that is awarded to you if you have the majority. And so, aside from that, I think all the factories are going to be the same from game to game. Correct me if I'm wrong. And the way that your actions are depicted here are the same. And so it's essentially the workers here that would affect you, maybe in a major way, most likely in a minor way, of how much money you might have from turn to turn. But you also have the variance of the these good tokens, and where you want to try to garner your influence based off of where these goods might be located. So my ranking for Nippon, and this is basically based off of the original game, was a 7.3 out of 10. I really enjoyed this game. I think this game is a little bit hard to teach and understand. I think games from this set of designers are typically on the heavier end, and so if you're not accustomed to a more complex game like this, if you've ever heard of Madeira, It was also by the same designers. It's also on Board Game Arena, a much more complex game than this. It's a heavier game for sure. And so that's why this game always appealed to me, because it seemed a little bit more approachable, not by much, of course, but it was a little bit more approachable than Madeda, right? And so this game, I really enjoyed the worker placement selection aspect of this game, and everything else that you're doing was pretty straightforward. I think the only thing that held it back for me from becoming a very replayable game was the amount of variance. I think it didn't have that element that I typically look for in a game that I adore. When you look at Rosenberg games with all the many little cards or tokens or tiles that you have in each individual game, those offer maybe you're doing kind of the same things in every single game, but it just feels different because you have a lot of different cards that you can mix and match. Whereas in this game, the variance is only in the the colors of the workers that you're taking, as well as where these tokens might be influenced. But and so you're still essentially trying to kind of react to what you have in front of you, but I don't think overall it's going to impact your decisions that much. So this is, if I'm to compare these to Rosenberg games, which I am off to do, I would compare this more to like a Caverna type of experience rather than Agricola, where the amount of variance is pretty low, and there are nuances here and there for that, but for the most part, it's going to play very similar from game to game. Now, off of my first impressions of this, and I forgot to mention there is a solo mode now for Zaibatsu, which I have not played, but I feel like is an interesting, AI experience where you flip over a tile, kind of tells you where to place a worker, and what kind of action they take, etc., to place out influence onto the board. And so I think it's a pretty straightforward from what I've read and gathered. It doesn't play terribly hard and should be pretty easy to recreate a two-player experience with that AI. But anyway, I like the additions of this game, Zaibatsu, the second edition of this game, mostly in terms of what kind of workers you're trying to grab. The fact that you have expert workers from the ship action as well makes this game, I guess, feel a little different in terms of how you order your workers, but it also feels a little bit more flexible as well, as you are able to get more resources based off of where your workers are. Once again, I apologize if I missed that from the original game, if this is a new edition or if it's not. I apologize if it's not. But anyway, this ship aspect is definitely new, and I do appreciate that. And so if you are a veteran of this game, I feel like there's enough here to appreciate the differences and have a good time exploring what this particular puzzle means. But overall, I feel like this game is very much like a Caverna type of experience in terms of a more chess-like, little to no luck or randomization during the game. It's all in the setup of the game, and here is the puzzle for everyone to solve. Do the best that you can. This game is very interactive because of it's very forwardly interactive because of the area majority aspect of this game, where a lot of the points do come from. But there are multiple avenues that you can do to pursue other points in this game as well, particularly on how you advance on your tracks, what kind of trains and ships and everything that you try to put up onto your board as well as onto the central board, and what kind of factories you try to aim for to make your experience different from game to game. And so you can kind of explore, and I think the replayability is more in the exploration of the different factories and different ways that you can score points in this game. And then as you get better at this game and play other people at a similar skill ceiling or skill level, the way that the meta of the game or your choices in similar situations, how they evolve into a more emergent style of play, is probably what this game would reward as you replayed it. And since it is deep and complex enough, I see that happening. It's very similar, kind of, not very similar, but somewhat similar to like a Terra Mystica type of experience where the little to no variations from game to game really rely on the player experience and mastery to make it replayable and interesting. And so, rather than like the inherent variations in the components at the beginning and during the gameplay, that makes it different from game to game and fresh and refreshing, right? And so, anyway, so I think this particular version of the game would get a slightly higher score for me, in terms of also the way that it looks. It looks very modern and sleek. I like the production of it very much, and the additional mechanisms are really good as well. But I do enjoy this game and hope that it receives great praise as another addition from the team who produced this game. So that is Nippon Zaibatsu. Thank you for joining me on this quick review. Hope that it was helpful and hope that you schedule an appointment with me real soon. Take care.